Good morning again. We're going to, this morning, we have a few things we want to take care of. There's extensive reporting from Delegate Jones' committee. And at this time, Delegate Jones, we're going to ask that you will be reporting on House Bill 1414, the omnibus bill, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And House Bill 1414 was considered in our subcommittee yesterday afternoon, and after robust debate testimony, I can explain the bill for the full committee, and then I will move as accorded in the committee. House Bill 1414, which is Speaker Fillercorn's bill, as substituted, restructures Virginia's transportation funding model, and it addresses the unsustainability in our fuels tax and dramatically reduces our registration fees. There is an increase on the gas tax and indexes that to the motor fuels tax to the consumer price index. It establishes and imposes a new annual highway use fee on fuel-efficient vehicles. It establishes a voluntarily mileage-based user fee program. It reduces the registration fee on most passenger vehicles. It establishes a unified Commonwealth Transportation Fund in which all transportation revenues are deposited and then distributed to programs. Existing programs are held harmless in this restructuring. It provides for the Transportation Trust Fund being recodified and updated with new distribution shares. It outlines the uses of funds provided to the Commonwealth Mass Transit Fund. It establishes the Commonwealth Rail Fund to support the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority and DRPT rail efforts. There's the Highway Maintenance and Operating Fund, and it recodifies other transportation funds in addition to including a piece about motor vehicle safety inspections being required every other year, so every 24 months. And again, this bill had a substitute, and we debated it vigorously, and it was moved out of our committee as substituted 6-2 with the understanding that this would be referred to the Finance Committee. And at this point, I would so move that we report and refer to Finance as substituted.
Okay, so Delegate Jones.
Substitute.
Okay, Delegate Jones, at this time, we want to adopt the substitute.
Yeah, I would move the substitute.
Okay. Second?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and properly second that we adopt the substitute.
Thank you, Dylan McQuinn. At this point, I would move the bill to be reported and referred to Finance as substituted.
So the motion has been made that the bill be recorded and accepted and moved to, we're going to open it up now.
Do you have any questions?
Okay. Are there any questions of the committee at this time? Okay. And we ask that you please, thank you, Dr. Rome.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Did we vote on the substitute? I know we moved it and it got a second. Did we vote on it? I'm not. Yeah, I think we need to vote on the substitute, Madam Chair.
Okay. At this time, the motion was made and properly second that we vote on the substitute. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose? All right, thank you. Delegate Rome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the subcommittee chair, Delegate Jones, as well, for all the work that you've done on this as well, because I know you've really worked extensively on dealing with this bill. I had some questions just basically for the VDOT Secretary and Undersecretary, if they would be willing to take the mic. Great.
Secretary Valentine, good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Good morning. So I know that there's some good compromises that came out of here. Can you especially address, we had discussed basically whether to eliminate the safety inspections, and it appears now that there's been a compromise so that it's going to be once every 2 years, almost as if you're going to go in for your emissions every 2 years anyway for most drivers anyway. So this is something that you could kind of do to correspond with that. Can you just talk about basically the fiscal impact of that decision and basically what the real world implication will be just for drivers in general?
Yesterday, we discussed the fact that this certainly puts the issue on the table for people to debate. The reason that it is being discussed at this point is because the safety inspections are not tied to safety. The research has really been developed where 35 states have eliminated the safety inspections, including D.C. Of those states that do not have any safety inspections over the last 10 years, the number of crashes have declined 8%. In Virginia, over the last 10 years, they've declined 2%. I'll ask Deputy Secretary Donahue to go over some of the insurance information that has been presented as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Delegate Rome, several other things on kind of the safety inspection. And again, as you noted, the bill does include kind of a compromise position between the current law today and what was initially proposed was a full-out elimination of the requirement. We did do a fair amount of research this year looking at it. One of the really important things that we found looking at safety on highways, and as the Secretary's talked about before this committee, safety has been moving in the wrong direction in Virginia, is that around 94% of crashes, according to the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, are the result of driver behavior. And so if you look at the other policies that are in this legislation when it comes to handheld and distracted driving, open alcoholic containers in cars, and seatbelt use, those are really the driving factors behind a lot of the safety issues we've seen on our highways. The National Highway Transportation Safety Administration found that around 2% of crashes are a result of vehicle failure. And so, again, that is, I'm not to say that that is not important. 2% is still, something we don't want to see. And so this bill does seek to strike that compromise position. We did also look at insurance premiums that were publicly available on the internet and compared all 50 states. We were trying to determine whether or not there was a correlation between having a safety inspection and having lower auto premiums. We did not find that connection. The one correlation we did see is that generally the lower a state's crash rate was, the lower their auto premiums were, and we believe very much that the policies included in this bill will help reduce crashes in Virginia.
Great. Madam Chair?
Yes.
I may have a follow-up question. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate it. And thank you both for addressing that, because I know that's been a really big concern for a lot of my constituents. So I'm glad that we were able to find a common ground piece on that. I was also hoping that you would be able to address basically the Northern Virginia Regional Transportation Authority, more or less just how we are kind of restructuring some of the money for that and its effect on localities, more or less. So Prince William County, as a lot of folks are aware, they very much supported Delegate Watts' bill last year for HB 2085, where basically it would be the 6 metro compact jurisdictions within the MVTA that would be dealing with the grantor's tax and the TOT increase. And previous to that, the amendment that I had requested from the governor in 2018 for the metro bill that he ended up sending down, because that was how that was structured, it kind of left Prince William more in a pretty good spot where we were able to get a lot, where we would have been able to get a lot from the MVTA while at the same time not having to deal with the grantor's tax, especially since obviously we didn't have Metro. Can you just basically talk about how this new bill will basically affect MVTA funding regionally, which is good, and at the same time the responsibilities that Prince William will have?
Yes, we will address that. I just wanted to close the safety argument, safety discussion with the fact that what is in this bill prioritizes safety in a way that we've never done in Virginia. It's with systemic improvements to our corridors, shifting how we actually make investments in safety, and behavioral changes that have been proven. More than 800 people have died in Virginia over the last 3 years, and the measures that are in this bill are intended to save between 120 and 160 lives. It's a very serious investment in safety, so I wanted to just close out that piece of the discussion. With the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, the governor's amendments in 2018 to the Metro bill were intended to help replenish some of the funding that came from the authority that was directed to Metro. These were not accepted, as you know. This bill actually reinstates those amendments. We have Delegate Watts' bill, we have the omnibus bill. And, as we have discussed with you, we would be very happy to discuss how this could be amended, but it is the contribution, the one true statement in all of this. It will get more money back to the region for other transportation priorities. And this bill actually has $30 million going back to the authority right now.
Delegate Freitas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for the Commissioner. If there was no discernible benefit with respect to, I'm sorry, the Secretary.
No, that's okay. I did smile over at the
Yeah. Get
ready.
If there was no discernible safety benefit to keeping the inspections, so why have a compromise to do it once every 2 years? Why not just eliminate it if it's not helping with safety and it's not helping with insurance claims?
For those of us who have listened and really appreciated a lot of the input to this decision, it was felt that a compromise would be perhaps the smartest way to move forward. There are those who have come forward about jobs, the implications to communities that we are all trying to take into account. It is a way to try to balance what the automobile dealers and gas station owners and various repair shops have actually presented to us on what that impact could be. And at the same time, trying to make wise decisions for Virginians. This does allow Virginians to keep more of their money. It would give them more time to actually get the safety inspection, which is actually one of the issues that has been told to us. I don't have scientific data on this, but anecdotally, just the difficulty with some families being able to go during certain hours.
Madam Chair, follow question?
Yes, Delegate Freitas.
And I certainly understand that. I understand sometimes compromises are made in order to move a bill forward, even if, the whole nature of a compromise is nobody is completely happy. But I don't understand the justification of keeping it under the guise that it could have an impact on jobs, because now it sounds like we're keeping in a program, which again, if the intent of the program is to provide additional safety, and it's not necessarily doing that, then we're not saving jobs by keeping the program. We're simply diverting resources away from people that have the money. And currently we're forcing them to spend it on a program that's not fulfilling its goals, instead of spending it in other areas of the economy where jobs would be created over there. So I'm not sure why we would maintain a program under the auspices of that it's creating or maintaining jobs when those jobs could be shifted to another area of the economy that would actually be serving its purpose.
Madam Chair, my response was not comprehensive. Certainly, there are those who represent various offices who also believe that these do improve safety, that in the long run, that it does save drivers, consumers money because you're able to address safety or mechanical needs earlier. You're able to maintain your car. So there really is a balance. And you may be hearing from some folks this morning who really passionately believe that having safety inspections do help make us safer. The point that we're trying to make is that this is money that Virginians pay every year. They're required to pay every year. It is a primary offense not to get your car inspected. If you're driving with an expired inspection sticker, it can cause a traffic ticket of $50 to $100, sometimes more. You don't get points for it, but it does go on your driving record, and it can be used as a reason to charge more money. We're just trying to bring to the table a balanced approach to this. I don't want to discount what anyone says about what they believe the safety implications are. I don't want to discount what it could mean to any business. We're just trying to have a discussion about what would be the smartest way for Virginians to invest their money. And that's really the discussion that we're having.
Madam Chair, follow question?
Yes, and then Delegate Freitas, I want to get to someone else. We got a line of folks here.
Absolutely, Madam Chair. Final one. With respect to the Virginia Passenger Rail Authority Act, the Article 6 portion of this, I'm reading through. There's obviously a lot of text involved in this bill, but it's talking a lot about having a authority over local concerns, a lot of eminent domain authority, and I'm just wondering how significant a departure is this from what we're currently doing with respect to rail?
Right now, DRPT administers programs, grant programs. They develop plans. This actually would put the authority in a position to manage the business of passenger and commuter rail. They would have the contracts with operators such as Amtrak and VRE. They would be able to issue debt to help finance the operations, the construction that would take place within within the rail authority. It would allow them to own and to acquire and to sell real estate. It actually creates more of a business model for the authority as we are mitigating the risks and liabilities to the Commonwealth.
Thank you, Delegate Fritz. Delegate Austin, and then followed by Delegate Jones.
Madam Chair, thank you. Madam Secretary,
Yes, sir.
I want to talk to you a little bit about something that you and I have talked about extensively, and that is air service out of our air carrier airports in the Commonwealth. Out of the Roanoke Airport service area, 60% of all people who fly from that service area go into North Carolina or to other airports to fly. And 70% of the people within the airport service area of Lynchburg Airport commute other places to fly, and that's common throughout the Commonwealth. I'm not as greatly concerned with that as I am how that prohibits our ability to grow the economy and recruit industry to our region. We need to go west, as you and I have discussed, and you've been gracious and helpful in trying to accommodate that. How does this bill help that situation, Madam Secretary?
It allows up to $1 million going through the airport fund, which now will go through the Commonwealth Transportation Fund, to be used for economic development purposes. Today, the funding that goes through the aviation fund cannot be used for those purposes. Our team has really worked with you and your office and many others across Virginia about how can our airports be more competitive. You have been very clear and helped us see how in competing with other states across the country, how that can often put us to a disadvantage. We are hoping through this that we will be able to compete as well.
Okay, so we're putting aside $1 million,
Up to $1 million.
up to $1 million in a fund that is at the discretion of the Secretary of Transportation?
Well, it goes through the airport board. It would go through, it would fund very much like the other funds through the Department of Aviation.
So we're not reducing the appropriation to the Aviation Board.
No, sir.
So we're not taking away any dollars from them. We're setting aside an additional $1 million, up to $1 million, which, as you know, I have a bill in, a budget amendment request for $2 million to set aside, because there's, Dulles has needs consistently as they're a larger airport. I'm just concerned that $1 million will not be enough. But if there are multiple needs, there could be 2 needs within a year. So, certainly right now these airports have nowhere to go for additional revenue to subsidize airlines. And we're not ever going to help that situation unless we can help the airports subsidize airlines to do that. So I want consideration given to that, Madam Secretary, if you would. I do have concerns with the safety inspection. I've talked to multiple businesses in my district who say it's going to impact them significantly. I'm not so sure. The Deputy Secretary and I have had good conversation on this, and I appreciate his cooperation, as he always is. Every other year is certainly entertainable, but it really doesn't appeal to me that much right now. I commend you on the rail portion. Well, I think we're doing exactly what we need to do on the rail portion in the Commonwealth. So there are parts of this bill I like. There are parts I don't like, Madam Secretary. But the airport, I really want to see us work to fix that problem. Thank you, Madam.
And Delegate Austin, we have with us this morning Mark Flynn, the Director of the Virginia Department of Aviation, so you'll have an opportunity to have some additional conversation later. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Delegate Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just ask the Secretary if you could walk through some of the other safety provisions that are in this bill, including the handheld ban and the primary seatbelt offense.
I would be happy to. As I mentioned earlier, the number of fatalities in Virginia are going in the wrong way. It's gone up about more than 15% since 2014. It's really interesting that I was reading that the number of fatalities are actually going up and the number of serious injuries are declining, and that part of the theory is that people aren't braking, that we're so distracted we're not braking. It's affecting our work zones. It's affecting those who use our highways. The measures that are in this bill are really intended to save lives, between 2 or 3 lives a week in Virginia. One is the open container law that we would now ban. And I have to ask you, I tell you that twice I've been asked. We say open container, and somebody said of Coke, and no. It is of alcohol, and so it's open containers of alcohol in the passenger area of a car. It actually penalizes us in securing federal funds and having those funds be flexible within our system. So that is number one. Number two, seatbelts as a primary offense. Of the more than 800 people who die on Virginia's roads, 52% of them are not wearing a seatbelt. I read a statistic just recently from DMV. Of teenagers who die in traffic accidents, 60% are not wearing seatbelts. This is really a measure, when we invest all this money in safety, this is really a measure for Virginia to actually do something meaningful. And the other is the ban on the handheld. 68% of accidents, and including fatalities, have some kind of distracted driving accounted, whether it's dialing a phone, texting, handheld, it's all of this together. And it is just a way for us to help, all of our citizens and our youth to realize really the responsibility that comes with driving. It doesn't cost money to do this. It's really making a decision that in Virginia, we really want our roads to be safe. And it's not just those in the car where you are, it's everybody else you share the road with. So these three measures in particular, I believe, are very important. They have a delayed enactment, I believe now of 2 years.
1 year.
Is it 1 year? Okay, 1 year. We're trying to see how quickly DMV could do this, but it's creating an advisory group with safety organizations, with law enforcement, with equity and justice organizations to come together to determine education materials for citizens, for law enforcement, for state police, so that we have a comprehensive program. Everybody understands what we're doing and why we're doing it. So it will be implemented. They'll go into effect in July of 2021. I do expect a true comprehensive communications plan about this. Those are the major pieces in the bill.
Madam Secretary, could you expand a little bit on, we talk a lot about Northern Virginia and rightfully so.
Yes.
I don't want Northern Virginia folks to, they get.
We love all our regions.
They are very
Yes.
sensitive when you say Northern Virginia or anything. So just expand a little bit on the primary and secondary roads and communities across the Commonwealth that the benefits for those various communities, please.
Commissioner Britch is actually here with me today, but if we don't make investments in our pavements and in our structures, we are going to fall far below what our performance targets are. We today pave our secondary roads about once every 15 years. Madam Chair, you know the condition that can actually result in. And so we and VDOT, under the leadership of Commissioner Britch, has really undertaken over the last year to restructure our business model when it comes to maintaining our assets, including pavements and structures and special structures. How can we do this? Not looking at where we are over 2 years or even over a 6-year period. It's looking at the life cycle. Pavements being about 20 years, structures being about 30, perhaps even to 50 years. The program, if we're able to secure the funding in this bill, we will be able to meet and expand our performance targets, actually focusing more on the roads that are used, that are traveled the most, not necessarily by category. I believe it's there's actually a full presentation on this if anyone is interested. You may have presented to this committee, but it's really a matter of preserving the assets for as long as we can and allowing us to address secondary roads and city streets, which often get the least investment.
Okay. And how about bridges and other structures that we often?
It allows us
Right.
also, we don't want any deficient structures in Virginia. So right now we are working very hard to make sure we are meeting the highest standards for these. We are maintaining them to keep them safe. But with the funding in this legislation, for the very first time in Virginia, we will be allocating funds to the rehab that could be available for the rehab and replacement of structures. We have about 25 in Virginia, the majority of them being in Hampton Roads, major bridges and tunnels that are all going to come to their end of life, probably within the 15 to 25 years. This allows us to begin putting about $85 million in FY24 into the long-term strategy for how we address them as we also preserve them. So there is a great deal in how we manage the assets within transportation in this bill.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. And Delegate LaRock, and this is the last, because then I'm going to open it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions, and I'll blurt them out. Hopefully you'll have time to answer both. One is, what taxes, if any, would be unique to Northern Virginia in this? And the second one is partly a statement, but I'll ask you to comment on it. You mentioned that seatbelts, accidents, 52% are not wearing
Of those who die.
seatbelts, of those who died. So that would mean 48% were wearing seatbelts that died. So isn't that kind of statistically irrelevant? I mean, if there's barely any statistical difference between those who were wearing and those who weren't, it kind of leads me to the conclusion that that's not evidence that you need seatbelts.
The first, I would say, there are many causes for accidents. There are many reasons that there are accidents. 85% of Virginians today wear seatbelts, so there's a smaller percentage who don't. We're trying to get above 90% to wear their seatbelts. I'd like 100%, to be honest with you. But of that small percentage not wearing seatbelts, they account for 50% of the deaths. That's really the point. Most people are wearing seatbelts, but of those who actually die in accidents, of that small percentage, or 15%, 50% of them are the ones who actually die.
Okay, thank you. And Northern Virginia taxes, unique, if any?
This is really taking a statewide approach to transportation funding. So I will say that and within this bill, it does allow the gas taxes that are in Northern Virginia, the regional gas taxes in Northern Virginia, Hampton Roads, and along 81 to also be tied to CPI. And then in the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority, trying to restore some of that funding, it does include the 5 cents on the grantor's tax. These are the amendments that the governor had sent down in 2018. 5 cents on the grantor's tax, which I believe there's a compromise, and then an increase on the transient occupancy tax from 2 to 3%.
Thank you.
That results in $30 million going back to the authority for other transportation priorities.
Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate LaRock. Thank you, Madam Secretary. At this, you might want to stay close by. At this time, we're going to ask if any of the public want to speak in favor of this bill. Anyone who wants to speak in favor of the bill?
Madam Chair, I'm Don Hall with the Virginia Automobile Dealers Association. We have talked to many of you all about the safety inspection program here in Virginia. Let me assure you a couple things. Number one, first and foremost, we do appreciate where this administration is, where the Secretary is and her deputy, in working on the idea that every other year is a good compromise rather than no inspections at all. We could bring up experts right now to give you probably 30 minutes of testimony refuting many of the facts that say that it shouldn't exist, but rather that it should exist, and the goodness that safety inspections provide. But I will tell you something that we need to keep in mind too. For $20, and the wisdom of this committee over the years, for $20, I can tell you now, if this goes through, every 2 years, what's right and what's wrong with your car. And that's a real benefit, because I can tell you, most of my car dealers statewide do them for free to begin with. We're going to get paid one way or the other, whether you fix them down the road later on or you fix them because of a $20 charge. So you're going to save the consumers of Virginia by keeping this program in place, for sure. Now, for high mileage drivers, there are going to be a lot of miles in some of those cars in 2 years. For the average driver, not so much. I think, again, I can't say enough good about the work of this administration to recognize that they are important. And trust you me, they are important. You all probably are going to inspect your cars anyway because we're responsible citizens. It's the guy or gal next to us who hasn't done so that we're concerned about. So at least by keeping it in place, we think it's a great compromise, and it's one that we deeply appreciate, and we appreciate your support of that compromise within this bill. So thank you for your time. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hall.
I'll be brief. Danny Plugger with Virginians for High Speed Rail. This bill makes generational investments in passenger rail and truly starts moving us forward and getting cars off the road and giving our communities better options for connectivity. So we support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Whit Clement, I'm here on behalf of the Virginia Transportation Construction Alliance, 300 and some members, road builders, the aggregates. We appreciate very much the Speaker's bill. We think it's a good comprehensive approach. We think it's a great way to play catch up as we do try to bring our transportation network where it needs to be given our population and our highway needs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Barrett Hardiman. I'm here on behalf of the Greater Washington Partnership. The partnership is a business alliance of the largest employers in the capital region from Baltimore to Richmond. We'd like to commend the administration on bringing this bill forward and keeping our transportation system competitive in a global economy, and we ask that you support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Morning. My name is Jason Stanford. I'm with the Northern Virginia Transportation Alliance and the Northern Virginia Transportation Business Coalition. We're supporting this legislation in support of new funding for transportation, especially for Northern Virginia. I hope that as we continue to work through this process, we can fully restore the regional money for the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. There was $400 million in this next round, $1.7 billion in projects submitted. So that is a top priority for Northern Virginia, but we are supporting this legislation.
Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chair, members of the subcommittee. Phil Abraham, representing the Old Dominion Highway Contractors Association, a group of highway contractors from across the Commonwealth. We strongly support this bill. Remind the members of the committee, in terms of the Smart Scale program, in each of the first 3 rounds, we've seen at least 7 times the amount of requests for funds as funds were available. So this will do an important step in terms of addressing those tremendous needs. Thank you.
Mr. Hardiman. April.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good morning.
I'm Lisa Guthrie with the Virginia Transit Association, and our organization represents the transit agencies across the Commonwealth. We feel that this bill would, by restructuring the entire way that transportation is funding, it will reduce the volatility and dependence on different pots of money where we're all in it together. We think that it will also address the long-standing, long-term needs of our state of good repair for our buses. So we strongly support it and urge you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Dave Alba on behalf of the Northern Virginia Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber supports the bill.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Brian Gordon on behalf of the Apartment and Office Building Association of Metropolitan Washington. We appreciate all of the work that the administration has done to come to this compromise language, and we strongly urge your support.
Thank you.
Tracy Baynard on behalf of the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority. We really thank the administration for starting this discussion on how to replace the funding that the region lost for all of our modes, and look forward to the conversation during the rest of the session.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair.
Good
Trip
morning.
Pollard on behalf of the Southern Environmental Law Center and Virginia League of Conservation Voters. We strongly support many of the key components of this bill, particularly including the increased funding for rail and transit and the restructuring of transportation funding. We do object, though, to one important component, and that is the fee it would impose on cleaner, fuel-efficient vehicles. With transportation being the #1 source of carbon pollution, we need to be encouraging the purchase of these vehicles rather than discouraging them. Legislation cannot be adopted in a vacuum, and we encourage you to delete or defer this section. There are other ways can make up that revenue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Michelle Satterlin on behalf of the Volkswagen Group of America. Our subsidiaries include Audi, Volkswagen, and Electrify America, which is seeking to put an electric vehicle network charging system across the United States and in the Commonwealth. I want to thank the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary as well for their work on this issue. We very much are appreciative of their removal of the $64 licensing fee on electric vehicles. However, our concerns are related to the highway user fee, which includes electric vehicles. We want to sell electric vehicles in Virginia. We want the mass adoption of these cars. But if we put any additional fees on these cars, and our assessment is instead of $64, it will actually increase if we use the highway user fee. So we have asked that they continue to work with us to consider an amendment that says until there is 1% total registration of electric vehicles in the Commonwealth, the trigger of the highway user fee does not go into effect. We hope to continue working with them on this and having this conversation, but that is our concern. Otherwise, we appreciate the good effort on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members
Good morning.
of the committee. My name is Mitchell Smiley, and I'm with the Virginia Municipal League, and I'd like to thank the Secretary and Deputy Secretary for all their work on finding a more sustainable basis for funding transportation in the Commonwealth, and we appreciate their efforts in this bill to put transportation revenues on a more sustainable path, and we support those efforts. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Secretary, Bob Bradshaw, President and CEO of the Independent Insurance Agents of
Good morning.
Virginia. Certainly this was well discussed yesterday. I just want to remind the full committee of a couple of things. If there was a carve out on the safety inspection programs, we would have a little bit of a different discussion. First of all, there is absolutely no insurance comparison between states on safety inspections. You can't compare Virginia with, say, North Carolina, where they elect their commissioner of insurance. Vote for me and I'll reduce your auto premiums. We are not recommending that you elect your insurance commissioner. However, I do want to underscore that. But we take some great comfort in the fact that 1.6 million cars are rejected and need to be repaired before they're put back on the road annually. So yes, we support every other year as opposed to getting rid of it entirely. We also think you need to take a look at, say, South Carolina. Got rid of the safety inspections in 1995. They're now discussing bringing it back because their fatality rate is so high. But again, thank you for your
Thank you.
Morning, Madam Chairman.
Good
Mike
morning.
O'Connor, representing Virginia's Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Stores. For the first time in 73-year history of our association, we are endorsing this bill. It meets two standards. It's statewide, and at the end of the final implementation, it will keep our gas taxes below the competition in other states. So we're happy to endorse the bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, does any member of the public wish to speak against this bill? Wow. Maybe I wasn't supposed to say that. Okay. At this time, we're going to ask for a motion. Okay.
Second.
Okay, motion.
Substitute and refer to finance.
Okay.
As
Substitute. Okay.
Sorry, Jen.
Okay.
This'll take a little bit to get this up.
Okay, a motion has been made and properly second with the substitute that we report and refer to finance.
Okay, open vote.
And at this time, you may vote. Okay, the motion is passed 12-6. That this, House Bill 1414, be reported and referred to finance. As a substitute to finance. Thank you. Mr. Delegate Jones, if you would please complete your report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The next bill is House Bill 767 from Delegate LaRocque. I would note that the bill was reported from subcommittee with amendments, and the amendment retains the existing law providing that localities can regulate vehicles with a gross weight rating of 12,000 pounds and provides that the localities do not have the authority to prohibit parking of certain commercial vehicles used by public service companies, cable television services, or telecommunications services. However, I would also note that Delegate LaRocque, the patron has requested that the full committee reconsider one of the amendments so that I would let him speak to those amendments before the committee actually adopts them all.
We accept the substitute first, right?
There's amendments, right?
Amendments, yeah. Accept the amendments first. Just going, okay. All right. Delegate LaRock at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 3 line amendments that you have before you, have they been distributed? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would like to see amendments 2 and 3 be adopted. The one I just perhaps could entertain a little bit of additional discussion. There were questions raised in subcommittee as to whether or not the change proposed lowering the weight of the vehicles that would be dealt with in this bill from 12,000 to 10,000. These are vehicles that would be parked in residential areas, whether that would be appropriate. And so I did a little more research. I think Delegate Hurst raised that question and wanted to offer that it was not entirely an arbitrary decision. I have a handout here, and it basically just shows that roughly 21 different places in Virginia Code. Would you pass them your way, Les? Would you drop them down front? And the distinction between the vehicles is really that the size. There's in this handout that you'll see, it shows the little visual depiction of the vehicles that would fall above and below the 10,000 pound weight limit. So I'm not sure if this addresses the delegates' concerns, provides a little bit more information. In as much as the town of Leesburg asked me to bring this forward for that purpose, I just wanted to make sure that we had given that consideration to what that distinction between 12,000 and 10,000 pounds would make. And so I'm open to questions. Or,
Delegate Hammer, do you have a question? Okay.
Madam Chair, I would ask the delegate, understanding the initial intent of this was to add Frederick County's authority to be able to enforce these regulations. Now that we're changing the weight with this bill from 12,000 to 10,000 bills, I wonder if the other localities listed have been consulted and what their opinion is on the move from 12,000 to 10,000 pounds.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate LaRock.
Perhaps council can verify. This is permissive in that any locality could form that ordinance. So the direct answer to the delegate's question is we have not consulted them, but in as much as we're extending permission to modify their ordinances, hopefully if they see fit to do that, they could do that. And if not, if they find this to be one that would not work well in their local jurisdiction, they would just ignore it. Is that correct? Thank you.
Delegate Helmer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. I have no follow-up.
Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Speaking to the bill.
Delegate Hurst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the effort that the delegate has placed into trying to delineate between 12,000 and 10,000 pounds elsewhere in code, but when the intent of the bill is to be permissive to allow certain localities to restrict where residential vehicles and potentially commercial vehicles that are owned by small business are going to be located within a residential area, I'm not quite sure how this survey really helps to address the issue that I raised in subcommittee. I see 10,000 pounds being cited with emissions inspection programs, inspection of records, tangible personal property, tampering with odometer, fuel uses eligible for refunds of taxes. None of that has to do with the problems that we talked about in subcommittee, which is that if you're a small business owner and you have a car that you use for your small business, that's 12,000 pounds, we are now telling you that the locality has the right to impose an ordinance that says that you can't park in front of your house if you don't have a driveway. You got to go drive somewhere else, potentially blocks away, in order for you just to park your own small business vehicle. And so while I voted for this in subcommittee, I continue to have real concerns about the impact this could have on small business owners who live in localities that do not have a driveway, and so that's why I will not be supporting this bill.
Delegate LaRock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, speaking to the amendment number 1, the references to Virginia code were really meant to illustrate that this is already a well-established distinction between 10,000 and below and 10,000 and above. I don't think that it really doesn't speak to the other concern that the delegate has expressed, and which is whether or not it's appropriate, I guess, and I'm paraphrasing what I understand the question to mean, whether or not it's appropriate to limit people who would be bringing some of these fairly large vehicles back into a residential neighborhood or not. And to that, I would say that when we're talking about residential neighborhoods with potentially very small streets, granted, it may be an inconvenience to tell someone that they can't bring a panel truck or a vehicle that may fall within the 10,000 and below, to tell them that they can't park that on a city street. But that's, I think, what zoning designations are meant to deal with. They meant to keep residential neighborhoods residential in character, to protect not only the driver of a vehicle, but the residents of a neighborhood who don't necessarily want to have a street lined with commercial vehicles that are owned by people who live in that. That may be okay with some towns. I think Leesburg is an area where there's many narrow streets, somewhat historical areas, and if they chose to make an ordinance, I'd say that perhaps one could reason that is consistent with the local control that a town like Leesburg should have within reason. Obviously, an ordinary van with some decals on the side would be a commercial vehicle, but the size of it I don't think would be too intrusive, and certainly wouldn't. I think the greater concern here is safety. When visibility is limited by bigger vehicles on smaller streets, then they become less safe. But I certainly appreciate the delegates' concerns and hope I've at least somewhat acknowledged them, if not put them at ease to some degree. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate LaRock. Delegate Helmer, and then Delegate Bagby, and then we're going to move forward because we have a lot on additional information that we need to, the committees that need to report. Thank you.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I would ask the delegate if not knowing, desiring to support this bill and not knowing the impact on localities that I represent of the switch to 10,000 pounds and not having been able to consult, if you would be interested in potentially accepting a friendly line amendment that strikes, that restores the 12,000 and eliminates the 10,000 pounds but keeps the additional.
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, Delegate Jones.
I don't think we've actually adopted the amendment yet, so.
No, we have not.
That's the original.
Okay. Okay, sorry.
The original.
Delegate Helmer, was that a question for Delegate LaRock?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I understand the intentions of the delegate. Really, what I believe we're discussing now is which of these to accept. So a motion to accept 2 and 3 would be what I would consider the most friendly. Passing the bill is certainly the ultimate goal. And if we don't pass line amendment 1, that would accomplish what Delegate Helmer is, I think, proposing. So just to sort of clarify how we could move forward, I think, since none of these have yet been adopted by this committee, Council, am I generally on track there?
Madam Chair, yes, if the committee has not adopted any of the line amendments, I believe that line amendments 2 and 3 were not being discussed at this point. If the committee were to adopt line amendment 1, it would keep the language as it is in current code, which is a limit of 12,000. If the committee did not adopt line amendment 1, then it would keep the bill as it was introduced, where it's 10,000 pounds.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Council. And so we can go to, I don't have to do the amendment right now. The motion needs to be made now for that? Or? Okay, all right.
2 and 3 first.
Okay.
So I make a motion.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
making a motion to adopt line amendment 1.
Okay. Line 1? Okay.
Madam Chairwoman.
Yeah, let's hold on 1 second.
This is going to be a parliamentary question. I want to make sure we're in the right place.
Okay.
Right now, as it states, it is 12,000 pounds in the code as it made it out of subcommittee, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I would make a motion to adopt the amendment because the amendment makes it now 10,000. Delegate Helmer would not like to have that amendment made. So I would make that motion to.
Chris, he wanted 2 and 3 to be moved. See, the bill is written as 10.
Can we move the motion? Could I have a motion to be made for its line?
Why don't you make the motion, Les, if you're comfortable?
Well, that's non-debatable. Lay it on the table.
I make a motion to lay the bill on the table.
Second.
Okay, motion is made, properly second, is non-debatable that we lay the bill on the table. And that's a recorded vote. Okay, vote is 10-6, that we lay on the bill on the table, and so the bill is 10-9, I'm sorry, that we lay the bill on the table. Thank you. Is that, Delegate Jones, does that complete your report?
Madam Chair, that does complete my report, and I thank the committee for their diligent work on these matters.
All right, thank you. Delegate Carr.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. House Bill 941, Delegate Webert, about electronic speed indicator lights on U.S. Route 17. The subcommittee recommended reporting 10-0, and I so move.
Okay. Motion has been made properly second. All in favor, make the sign known for House Bill 941, voting on the electronics. The bill is reporting out 17-0 for House Bill 941. Madam Clerk, you may close the roll. Well, 18-0.
Madam Chairman, House Bill 1217, Delegate Trans Bill. The subcommittee recommend reporting with amendments 7-4. In addition, there are other amendments that would come before the motion. The amendments already made limit this review to the Planning District 8. It limits infrastructure to be reviewed to those roads at risk of deterioration due to flooding, and extends the study from a 1-year study to a 2-year study.
At this time, could we have a motion to accept the amendments, please? Adopt the amendment. Okay, motion has been made, properly second, to adopt House Bills 1217, the amendments. And now we... And this is a voice vote. Yeas and nays?
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Those that oppose? There are none. Okay, now we accept the bill, right?
You can do it in Senate if you want, or we can do it right now.
So moved.
Motion has
Okay.
been made properly second that House Bill 1217 be adopted with the amendments. Make your vote. House Bill 1217 is reported out with the amendments, 13-5. So you may close the roll. Delegate Carr?
Madam Chairman, House Bill 1455 was the subcommittee recommended reporting 10-0. This is about an invoice for unpaid tolls and doing that through the mail. Again, the subcommittee recommended reporting 10-0, and I so move.
Okay. Okay. Motion has been made and properly second that we adopt House Bill 1455. Make it known by voting on the electronic. Okay. House Bill 1455 reports out 18-0. Mr. Clerk, you may close the roll.
You didn't vote, Betsy. Oh, I didn't vote? Oh, shoot.
Delegate Carr?
Madam Chairman, House Bill 563, Delegate Marshall's bill. The patron has requested the bill to go by for a day to allow additional testimony.
Okay. Could I have a motion to have House Bill 563 to go by for the day?
So moved.
Okay, motion has been made properly second that House Bill 563 will go by for the day. This is a voice vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Those that oppose? All right, thank you. Delegate Carr.
And finally, Madam Chairman, House Bill 1293, the patron has requested that this bill be stricken, and I so move.
Okay. Okay, motion has been made properly second that House Bill 1293 be stricken. All those that are in favor? Report, this is a recorded vote, sorry. Okay. All right, House Bill 1293 is reporting out being stricken from the docket. The vote was 17-1. 18-0.
Helmer decided.
18-0. Mr. Clerk, you may close. Close the roll.
Madam Chairman, that concludes the work of the subcommittee this week.
Okay.
At the request.
Okay. At the request of the patient,
Maybe a patient.
497. At the request of the patron, we're asking that House Bill 497 to be stricken, please. Could I have a motion? Okay, the motion has been made properly second that House Bill 497 be stricken from the roll. This is a recorded vote. Okay. Okay. House Bill 497, the vote is 18-0 that it be stricken from the docket. Mr. Clerk, you may close the roll. Is that it?
Guest presentation coming up.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, committees, for all your hard work. We really do appreciate it. We have one more thing on the agenda, and that is,
Where is he?
is Mr. Flynn. From the Department of Aviation will be here to give us a report and tell us about all the great things that are being done. Thank you.
I was promised that we had a long way to go.
Well, we're glad that you're here and good to see you, sir.
Well, that's good.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mark Flynn, Director of the Department of Aviation. We do have a PowerPoint, I believe, that will come up. I want to talk to you about aviation in two areas. One is the state of aviation in
Could we,
Virginia.
excuse me, Mr. Could we please have your attention? Thank you.
First is the state of aviation in Virginia, and then second is the state's role. If we could go to the first slide, do I have a clicker here? That was not the one to click. first slide. There you go, thanks. And then just right?
Yes,
right button. Okay. There are 66 public use airports in Virginia, and they go from Dulles Airport, the largest in volume, to some very small Gate City has an airport that's very small. Something that's important about our contrast of the Department of Aviation and Virginia's role here versus VDOT, the state doesn't own any of those 66 airports. Those are all owned by cities, counties, towns, or political subdivisions. There are a few privately owned airports, including one that is large, and all of those public airports do get funding. Our air transportation system really is growing. 28.6 million people get in airplanes annually. We have nearly 4,000 aircraft, nearly 14,000 pilots, and if you ask most any pilot when you're out campaigning or talking to your constituents, they'll let you know that they are pretty much the superior people in the world. That's the way we pilots are. There are a lot of private use airports and heliports, hospital heliports, corporate private use heliports, and some 60,000 drones are in Virginia, and that is a number that we're trying to keep up with. The benefits: 146,660 people work at or around airports, deal with aviation business. Wages of $7.7 billion and nearly $23 billion in economic activity. The Commonwealth has been putting about $26 million a year into our airport structure, and this is where we shift to the role of the state. We do lead the nation in aviation innovation. We were ranked first this year for UAS business opportunities. A new thing that's happening is remote control towers. It costs an airport about $9 million anyway to build a control tower. Manassas is looking at this now. And it costs about a third of that to do a remote tower, which is a monopole with 16 high-definition cameras. And then the control tower, the people working the control tower are actually in an office building off-site. It works very well. And Virginia is the leader in that, and we think that's going to take off. We've put a fair amount of money in that. As you know, Virginia has been a leader in delivery of drugs through Flirty, the commercial UAS delivery in Blacksburg, that is Project Wing. We have NASA Wallops, which has private businesses coming there all the time to test their drones, to test their systems, putting a lot of money there. Virginia Tech, as you know, is the Mid-Atlantic Aviation Project, which is heavily involved in the development of the drone world. In Manassas, we have Aurora, now Boeing. They are building the urban mobility vehicles they're still in the design testing phase, and that's going to be the helicopters that are ultimately unmanned, flying people from city to city, from city to airport. And we have Textron at Blackstone Airport. They are building expensive drones that do sensitive Department of Defense and State Department activities around the world. These are the drones that can stay up for 24 hours and follow the bad guys. We are working to make sure that drones the UAS, we call it, are accepted in the aviation system in Virginia. That's very important because unmanned aviation really is a significant part of the future of aviation in Virginia. Our capital program supports that economic development. We see airports as significant economic development tools. In fact, we're working very much with the Economic Development Partnership right now to have a database of all of the properties that are on or near airports that are ready for commercial growth. We've found that when you have a company, say, based in Georgia, they want to open a new plant. If you don't have a 5,000-foot runway in your area, you're not in that competition. And we're working on making sure that we stay in that competition nationwide. but you see the kinds of projects that we do fund now. If it is an airport with enough volume to have federal funding, the funding formula is 90% FAA, 8% state, and 2% local. And then if it's a smaller airport that is only state funding, it's normally 80-20. I'll talk to you about, we also have a project where we're doing 95% state funding, 5% local funding for rural airport runway rehab. We have about 6 or 8 or 10 small airports in Virginia that are at risk of going out of business, not being a place that people can fly their airplanes into because the pavement is getting in such bad condition. And yet, if you're a real small locality, if you have to pay 20% of the cost of doing a runway rehab, you can't do it. So from the state's perspective, it was worth it to invest that extra money and allow them to, and that has worked very well. Our $25.8 million we put in leverages around $50 million a year of FAA funding for airports. So that we really do prime the pump for federal funding. The Commonwealth Airport Fund dictates, the state code tells us how we distribute that $25.8 million. The air carrier entitlements, every air carrier airport gets $2 million a year with, I think, Lynchburg and Shenandoah Valley maybe is the only one now and Lynchburg's getting a little less. But anyway, mostly about $2 million a year. And then we have discretionary funds. That's where they come in and apply for grants for the air carriers and the reliever airports. And then general aviation gets about $4 million a year. Then the special fund, which is funded by the aircraft sales and use tax and the aviation fuels tax, that provides $1 million a year in maintenance projects. Our maintenance projects are different in nature than a VDOT, what VDOT calls maintenance, but still our maintenance, facilities and equipment, improving their structures that are there, again, the rural airport, and then we do a lot in aviation and airport promotion. That is, the air carrier airports can put up billboards, say fly Roanoke, fly Lynchburg, whatever, that kind of thing. We do have probably $26 million in unmet needs. That is, if you take everything that our airports need to do and the money we have available, it leaves $26 million there's just not, we don't have the money to provide that now. And we're working on it. We're also working hard on the workforce development at the department. There's a terrific demand in Virginia and nationwide for pilots, aircraft mechanics, people in every aspect of aviation. We're working with K through 12 and secondary schools and higher ed to make sure that happens. We have a bunch of programs going on there. And then the other thing we do is last year we flew state officials, the governor, the cabinet, sometimes members of the General Assembly, and other universities. We flew them 153,000 miles last year. And what that means, I think a good example is it allows, if you're a state official and one of the executive officials, you have business that you have to do in Fairfax at 9, Richmond at noon, and Norfolk at 3. You can do it by using our aircraft. And that ends up being a terrific time saver and really multiplies the abilities of our executives in Virginia to provide services to the citizens of the Commonwealth. So in a nutshell, Madam Chair, members, that's what we do. Thank you. Have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Flynn. Delegate Murphy.
Just a quick question. I've been made aware that the mechanics that are in the armed services, the Air Force, when they come out, they aren't qualified to be mechanics on our other airplanes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know for
and yet
pilots,
they've been doing it for 20 years.
Right.
And what's the deal there?
For pilots, I know, and Director of Flight Operations and Safety can probably help me there, but for pilots, you do have to then, if you're a military pilot, the rules are very different for military pilots.
No, I'm talking about mechanics.
I understand. And so they have to go through a process, not too difficult, to get their civilian license. For mechanics, this Watson Phelps.
Well, I've been told it's about $30,000 for them to get this, go through this program to get verified.
That is perhaps true. The military, the people who maintain aircraft in the military specialize, very specialized. So you may work on a helicopter. On that helicopter, you may work on one subsystem, whether it be rotors or hydraulics or whatever. AMTs, aviation maintenance technicians, in the civilian side, it's much more broad. You learn everything from working all parts of the airframe to engines. And we call that airframe and power plant mechanic.
Okay.
Additionally, you may become inspection authorized. So when a person from the military gets out, generally they need to train in these other areas. They can do that on the job, which costs them zero, and they can get paid while they do it. It does take longer. Or they can go to a school, which could have considerable costs, but they can do it in about half the time. So that's generally what you're hearing, I think.
Well, it just seems that it's a great way to fill or backfill your need for mechanics would be to
Absolutely.
try and make
and
this a
if they're
program.
interested in doing that, then I think the jobs are there.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Speaker, if I may.
Delegate Austin.
Director Flynn, thank you for being here today. Would you identify for the committee the air carrier airports in the state of Virginia, or have you already done that?
Well, no, I didn't. I had that
Okay.
graphic, but the map. But let's say we go, it's National Airport, Dulles Airport, Shenandoah Valley, Charlottesville, Roanoke, Lynchburg, Richmond, Newport News, Norfolk.
And identify what an air carrier airport is for the panel,
And an air
please.
carrier is one where airlines are going in and out with regular service. Yeah.
Okay. And an airport cannot subsidize an airline, is that correct?
That is correct. Every airport, every air carrier airport gets federal funds. When you get federal funds, you sign a grant agreement that has grant assurances. One of the rules of the FAA, a good rule, is you cannot economically discriminate one business on your airport versus another business on your airport. You have to make the same opportunities available to every business. So if an airport as a sponsor that has signed the grant agreement gives $500,000 to an airline, then it has to be in a position to give $500,000 to every other airline that's there. Or there would likely be a challenge through the FAA's process that the airport had violated its grant assurances.
Madam Chair, the reason I wanted the director to identify that for the panel is because I have a piece of legislation going through that'll create a governor's opportunity fund for air carrier airports, and it'll put $2 million in a general fund that will allow our air carrier airports, when they're trying to recruit additional air service, to have a fund to go to help subsidize airlines. Now, there has to be a sustainable route. It doesn't mean that they can just recruit an airline and they can fly to Boston. It has to be a sustainable route to Boston with produced ridership. So just wanted to enlighten the panel. I've got a $2 million budget amendment request in to put in place. Dulles routinely pulls from that, and the dollars would flow from the Secretary of Transportation would have authority to authorize that appropriation, and the dollars would go through Virginia Tourism, Rita McClenny, to the airline as a means by which for them to receive the revenues. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah,
Thank you, Mark.
Delegate Austin, where is the bill now? Do you have?
It's up in appropriations right
Okay,
now, but I'll be carrying a piece of legislation also that'll come before, I assume, transportation. I don't know where the bill is right now, but it would be a request to create this bill for the Governor's Opportunity Fund, Madam Chair.
Great.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Thank
Director
you.
Flynn.
Director Flynn, let me ask you a question. I was thinking about how, and then you sort of shared it with us about the preparing the next generation,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know, for this, for the aviation and introducing them to it. So what the programs that you are, the K-12 and higher ed, what are some of the things that are being done? Are they in school? Are you working with the educational system? How diverse is it? Are you making sure that little boys and girls who have never been introduced to this have an opportunity?
Yes, ma'am. Actually, if I can get real for a minute, kids that are in minority, poorer areas never would have never would think, I could be a pilot, I can be a mechanic,
Yes,
I
you're
can be
right.
this. And we recognize that. So our focus is on the underserved communities. We've had, just recently, the Martin Luther King Middle School in Richmond was out there. I think we had 25 or so kids. And we spend pretty much an entire Saturday with the kids, exposing them to every aspect of the kinds of businesses they can get into, from being a helicopter pilot to being a firefighter on the airport, to being a pilot, to being a mechanic. We also, in Virginia Beach, there's the Military Aviation Museum, which is a private charitable entity, and we have a contract with them to provide an educator, and her focus is going to K-12 school systems, particularly South Norfolk and in the underserved communities there. We also are in the process of it's a small airplane that you can fold the wings back, put it on a trailer, and we'll take it to schools, and we're going to focus on the underserved communities in the schools, underserved school systems. You bring that airplane to the school, you pop the wings out so it's a real, looks like a regular airplane, and the kids get in it and actually manipulate it. And they look at the flight controls, and then we're going to have two simulators in the back of the vehicle that's pulling them, and the kids will get in there and learn what it is about manipulating an airplane. But yes, ma'am, our focus very much is on the underserved communities.
Good. Excellent, thank you. And then I guess helicopters are on everybody's mind right now. You talked about the unmanned helicopters. Are these like the remote ones, and then are these will carry, I guess, humans as well as commodities?
Yes, ma'am. So at Manassas, Aurora Flight Systems, which was acquired by Boeing, they've had test flights of I call them helicopters. They tend to have 6 or 8 rotors in an array around, so that it's not relying on one rotor that can fail. They can actually have one of the rotors could fail and it would keep flying. But I'd say that within 15 years anyway, we will see people getting in one of those electric unmanned helicopters in downtown D.C., and 5 minutes later there'll be at Dulles Airport. 2 minutes later there'll be at National Airport. People in Norfolk will be at the Norfolk Airport or Virginia Beach Town Center. That is happening. Big industry is betting very heavily that that's going to happen, and they're spending the money to make it happen. That is the future of aviation. There already are some tests of of 737s or bigger aircraft that are unmanned flying cargo. Currently, what they're working on is flying it overseas, so that if something happens, it goes down in the ocean and it's carrying cargo instead of people. But when our kids are adults, they're going to be getting in an airliner, and there's not going to be a pilot up there.
It's kind of scary, but however.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting times.
Yeah.
Yeah, Delegate Rome.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just keep this super brief. I just wanted to plug that in the 13th District, we are actually home to the Aviation Institute of Maintenance off of Southern Road in Manassas. I've actually toured the entire facility, and they're working with some of our local high schools even, like Stonewall Jackson High School, which will have a aviation maintenance program, as well as Woodbridge High School. And it's such a high demand field right now, especially if you're looking for a place where you don't have to go into debt in order to get a job that pays really well right now. Like as they were showing us there during the tour, that's a fantastic opportunity for a lot of young folks.
Thank you, Delegate Rome. Thank you, Director Flynn. We really do appreciate you coming, and we'll have additional conversation because one of the things that I've talked to Secretary Valentine about, that some of these places, I really want the committee to have an opportunity to see and learn about what's going on in these various, from the rails to aviation, all of it.
Yes.
And so we'll be talking with you and possibly planning a trip somewhere.
That'd be fantastic.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
And at this time, if there's no additional information, or the meeting is adjourned.